I'm sure you already know and you notice every Good Friday that one of the things, or the main things that is unique to this day is silence. There is no opening song. Procession is in silence. Psalm was chanted. There was no music to it. Things are very low-key, very quiet on Good Friday. The altar is not dressed with the altar cloth. There are no flowers. There are no candles. Definitely there are no bells and no incense. It's a very bare liturgy, and it's wrapped again in profound spiritual silence. I got two different articles from two different people, and it was the same topic. It was the silence of Jesus. The first one, it was called Behold the Silent One, and that one was in English, and the second one was in Spanish, A la escucha de la llamada del silencio, listening to the call of silence. One thing that really moves me every Good Friday, again, is the silence unique to the liturgy of the Passion of the Lord. And there are many types of silences in our lives, many, many different ones. But I'm going to mention only two of them. The first one is the silence of fear, and the second one is the silence of trust. Two different ways of being silent people coming from very two different perspectives. The silence of fear and the silence of trust. In the Gospel of John, one thing that we see at the end is Jesus becoming quieter and quieter. Jesus slowly becomes the silent one. And yet we find Jesus remaining very strong, standing in the Gospel of John, but very quiet. If you look at the Passion that we read a few minutes ago, you're going to find very few words of Jesus in that narrative of the Passion according to John. One thing is very clear in the Passion of Jesus at the end of his life. He's going to confront and to be confronted by his two worst enemies. Number one, he's going to confront, and he will be confronted by the military and oppressive power of the Roman Empire that is going to be enfleshed in the person of Pilate. And also, he's going to confront and to be confronted by the hypocritical and fanatical power of the Sanhedrin, incarnated in the person of Caiaphas. The two faces of power. One of the authors that I read from these two different articles says that power is the diabolical simulation of the infinite. It's a fake sense of immortality. The diabolical simulation of the infinite. And the other author says that Pilate is going to abandon truth with a capital T to go running to the depth of a plenitude or fulfillment that is a pure illusion, that is not real. That fulfillment, that illusion, that plenitude is not real. And he says he does it so he can do evil, so he can kill others, so he can lie, so he can hate, and that he can deny the image of God that is even printed in him as a child of God. So two very dramatic characters appear in the Passion that we read this afternoon. Pilate is going to become a child of darkness and death because he's going to abuse his power. And the same thing happened with Caiaphas. It's very dramatic. Now that I was reading it and I was really into it and listening to the three different voices, when Pilate says to Caiaphas, "So he is your king," Caiaphas is going to give an answer that is really horrible for a man of faith to say that, a man of the people of Israel. He says, "We have no king but the Caesar." Up to that moment, for the Jewish people, only God was their king. Even the earthly king was only an instrument and a servant of the Creator God, the King of the Jews. And Caiaphas accepts the power of a pagan power upon him and his own people, but saying that the king that they have is the Roman emperor. He has denied God more than anyone in the story this afternoon. And then in the midst of all this physical pain and mental abuse, in the midst of the torture and the questioning and the being pushed around from Caiaphas to Pilate and from one place to another, when he's being filled with blown of fists and a crown of thorns and fear, and he's confronting also not only his own fear, Jesus' fear, but he's confronting even Pilate's fear. In the midst of being crushed by these two powers, the Roman and the Sanhedrin, Jesus becomes the silent one. Not much is being said out of his own lips. He becomes the silent one. Why? Why is he doing this? One of the articles that I read was from the Abbot Mauro Giuseppe Lepori, who is the General Abbot of the Cistercians. And he says that Jesus' silence is a choice. It's a need in the person of Jesus to remain silent. Because he says that what Jesus is doing, what all this is happening to him, what all this hatred and abuse and violence is inflicted on him, Father Leproni says that Jesus is going within himself. He's doing that not to escape, not to deny, not to avoid anything that is happening, but he's going in silence deep within him to remember who he is and to remain anchored on who he is. It's at that moment that Jesus, more than anything else, needs to remind himself of his own identity. To remind himself, blow after blow, spit after spit, that he is the beloved Son of God. And he goes inside. And I was reading a beautiful article. When I was reading it, I was thinking Jesus having a conversation with the Father, very quietly, deep within him, when all this unfolding around him and against him, he is basically praying. He's talking to the Father in a profound silence, going deep within him. And I could imagine Jesus in his silence saying to himself, profoundly and insistently saying, I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know God. Because one of the questions that Jesus did not answer to Pilate was when Pilate said, where do you come from? And you read it, the answer beautifully. He said, the gospel says, and Jesus did not answer. That's one of the questions Jesus chose not to answer. Where do you come from? Abbot Lepori says that we need to know where we come from, because it's a fundamental need to develop our human identity, and therefore our own spiritual identity. We do not develop a human, and we cannot develop a spiritual identity. We don't know who we are. We need to know where we come from. And we also come from God, the same way Jesus came from God. His silence is his own shelter, his own refuge from the evil that tries to destroy Jesus. The Father at that moment becomes the place of his eternal birth. Jesus becomes once again the Son of the Father, and the Father becomes his home, his refuge, and his rock. Going deep within him in silence, he goes back to the Father. And silence is the road to get there, to get home to the heart of the Father. His silence is truth. His silence demands all trust possible. The silence demands all hope possible. And silence demands waiting and patience as much as possible. It's a silence built on trust, hope, waiting, and patience. The silence of Jesus is grounded in God. It's grounded in the conviction that life, truth, beauty, justice, peace, and all good things will triumph in spite of everything that is happening to him. His silence helps him to remember quietly that life, truth, beauty, justice, peace, and everything that is good will triumph. And I was thinking, after reading this and writing this, that for someone who spoke for 3 years, preached everywhere and went everywhere, always speaking and preaching, that at the end of his life, silence would become his loudest homily. Silence would become his loudest cry, the silence of Jesus. My friends, we carry our crosses within us, and we confront the senseless violence and ongoing crucifixions of millions of people, brothers and sisters everywhere in the world, every single day and every single hour of the day. We see the abuses again of politics, and sadly we see also the abuse of fanatic religion. And again, crucifixion go on in the world today among so many innocent men and women. We also carry our own personal crucifixions, and we carry our own personal crowns of thorns. So today on Good Friday, with Jesus and like Jesus, we choose silence as our loudest cry and our clearest word. Silence. We know who we are. We know where we come from. And in spite of everything that unfolds every day around us, we choose to trust and we choose to wait in silence. Jesus chose it. Jesus waited. And at the end, the stone of the tomb was removed. So we wait in silence, not in desperation, not overcome by fear or anger, but we wait grounded in God. God, our home, our only true and final home. Because we also believe, like Jesus, that the stone will be removed once again, one day.